Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. So wonderful again to be with you tonight, looking at the stages of the path to enlightenment and looking at them in the manner that we have been, trying to be really thorough, the way that Buddha Shakyamuni encouraged us to be. Buddha Shakyamuni is quoted by saying, "O bhikshus, just like a goldsmith cuts, rubs, burns gold before buying it, so you should too examine my words, not out of faith for me." You shouldn't just believe what I'm saying out of faith for me. And there's a lot of layers to what the Buddha said in that point. It's not just that the Buddha was saying, you should discover these teachings for yourself. The Buddha was also saying that, hey, I've given a lot of different teachings to different beings with different aptitudes, and I taught them exactly what they needed to know at that moment for them. So you're going to need to, if you want to discover the final view, which I also taught, be able to analyze my teachings and see which is definitive and see which is figurative. And then once you have a faith that isn't based on just blind faith, you have a faith based on reasoning, then the Buddha said it was appropriate to call him, teacher. And we find this over and over again in the Buddhist literature of how important it is for us to engage in analysis, to use reasoning to establish these things that we say we have faith in. It's very easy to just to say I have faith in something, but if it's not based on reason, even if it's a correct faith based on saying I believe in something that actually is true, it doesn't mean that my mind won't turn away from the truth because I haven't established it for myself with reasoning and analysis. And we find it so important in this all the literature, as I was saying, and we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's, even in the beginning of the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment, where he first establishes the reasons for faith. We're looking at a text on the highest points of the four classes of Tantra, and you find right at the beginning, establishing reason for faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and showing that this is the supreme refuge. There is no other refuge that's adequate. This is the refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And why? Not because we should just have faith, because it's like our team or our sect or the kind of music we like, so we're sure it's intrinsically the best. We establish that the Buddha is an actual teacher of the highest truth based on our own reasoning and analysis and discovering little bit by little bit that what the Buddha said makes sense in our own mind based on using signs and reasoning to establish it in such a way that it becomes our own knowledge. It's not borrowed knowledge. We talked about last week this idea of first having borrowed knowledge from the wisdom arisen from hearing, and then we analyze it and we discover it. It becomes our own actual knowledge. And it's that kind of knowledge that will allow us to actually make our minds change, make our minds work more and more and more and more and more like the Buddha's mind, and eventually achieve the state through a complete maturation where there are no longer afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, because one has engaged in the pathway which leads one to that fully matured state. And in order to untangle the incredibly complex mess within our mind, this innate self-grasping ignorance, and then the imprints of it that cause the appearance of true existence to even high bodhisattvas when they're not in meditative equipoise on emptiness, it will take an enormous amount of understanding of what the mechanism of opponent is. What is the antidote to those things which cause the states that I don't want? So we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment, right in the beginning of it, where he's talking about non-Buddhist tenets and Buddhist tenets, and and not establishing things because we feel this is our religion, establishing things because we feel that this makes sense. This spiritual presentation makes sense logically. This isn't something that's just been told to us and we should just have faith in it. That's blind faith. If we haven't analyzed it with reasoning, then we aren't really establishing that we believe it in a real way. And anybody could come along with something that maybe sounds just a little bit fancier or is just a little bit trickier or slicker in the way that they talk, and we'll be able to believe anything if we haven't established what Buddha taught with our own logic and reasoning. So here it's speaking of one of the teachers of the non-Buddhist Indian traditions, Kapila. So you could fill in any other religious tradition when you hear this word Kapila. I believe he was a Samkhya teacher, but I'm not a great scholar historian. So if I've made an error with that, I apologize. But it's from the Acharya Samkarapati's Praise of the Supra-Divine, and this is from Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the Tantric Path to Enlightenment. The beginning section, which is reasons for faith. We're coming to this section here where Lama Tsongkhapa has just proven that the Buddha is the teacher and is now showing why we should have conviction that's induced by some kind of valid cognition based on who we say is the teacher, who we put in charge of our spiritual monopoly, who we put in charge. Our mind will have no end. Who do you want in charge of what that mind perceives? Someone who is flawed or someone who is not flawed? And the only way we can find flaw or not flaw is by using our kind of analysis, using conceptuality. We have to, as Acharya Chandrakirti says in the Madhyamika Avatara, arrive at the non-conceptual state of the nature of reality, the realization of it through a conceptual process. So it's this conceptual process that makes our mind bigger and bigger and bigger and gets it to the point where we generate an image in our mind that tallies with reality to the point that's so clear, and our mind is so calm when we experience it, that we're able to have that kind of conceptual experience, that generic image of the actual correct view that tallies with reality, transform into a yogic direct perception of the nature of reality. But this all happens through a conceptual process of using signs and reasonings and logic to establish things like beginningless lives, to establish things like things that we think that are permanent or impermanent, and things that we think that are happiness or suffering, and things that we think that are pure or impure, and things that we think are have a self, don't have a self. In order to turn our mind away from the wrong way of thinking, we have to have a counteracting force, which is the correct view. And as soon as there is something that is a deceptive consciousness, that's a wrong consciousness, when there's an opponent of an opposing valid cognition to kind of counteract it, that valid cognition, because it's correct, kind of kicks the wrong thing out slowly but by surely, by punching it over and over and over again with the correct idea. And that correct idea conceptually becomes part of the way that we think, to the point where we can have a direct experience of it. And then that makes our conceptuality in relation to the apprehension of true existence be totally different. And our apprehension becomes less and less and less because of our realizations of what the true nature is. But this is a process that we have to go through. So from this quote, Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the Tantric Path to Enlightenment, from Acharya Shamkarapati's Praise of the Supra-Divine. I'm not a partisan of Buddha. I do not hate Kapila and the others. So others meaning all other traditions other than Buddhism. I hold as a teacher only he or she whose word possesses reason. So here, this is our kind of gauge, can we establish what the Buddha is talking about with reason? And of course, there's reason based on belief, but that's not blind faith. That's a belief based on reason, that we could trust what this being is stating because of the reasoning we've used about other things that no one else has presented. You should forsake partisanship and hatred for the systems of your own and others' teachers and analyze which of them provide good and bad explanations. So we see even in Buddhism, why are we cutting and rubbing it? Why is the Buddha telling us not to believe him? The Buddha is telling us not to believe him because when we look at the tenet systems, the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, the Chittamantra, and Madhyamaka, we find an incredible amount of different positions that are being presented, and they are all positions that the Buddha taught. So we have to be able to use our own critical analysis to see which ones were being taught to a specific group of disciples who needed that for their evolution and may or may not have been the final view of reality. Now we know that the Buddha spoke to the Madhyamaka crowd and taught them the final view of reality, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. But there are other cases where those teachings need to be interpreted. Those teachings need to be understood in a way to understand that the Buddha was speaking to a certain person at a certain time and may have said something a lot coarser than what the final view is. So this is what we're talking about. So even within Buddhism, this is what we're cutting and rubbing. The Buddha didn't say cut and rub everyone else. The Buddha said cut and rub what I have to say. And that's what we do when we're looking at the tenets and we're trying to climb the staircase of emptiness and see if it tallies with reality. I find it interesting that we can say we're followers of Buddha, but then we say, oh, I follow this certain tradition or that certain tradition. This is an older tradition. Well, this is a tradition that I know was special because my Lama said it was special. And if we don't use our own critical analysis, we can get sucked into something that may have been a figurative teaching that was for a specific kind of group of people. History isn't going to dictate whether or not this is the truth. Reasoning and analysis dictates that it's the truth. If something that you're saying is true can be invalidated by another person who comes along and says with valid cognition, you find that what was conceived to be true wasn't in the final way and has to be interpreted. So we find that the Buddha taught various things. The Buddha taught that, you just have to get rid of this idea of a permanent, unitary, independent self of person, and this will get you out of samsara. And then said, we got to get rid of this idea of this idea of a person that has autonomous, substantial reality. And then said, oh no, you got to get rid of this idea that things exist externally and that you're imputing everything as having some nature of externality and it's only the nature of your mind. And then the Buddha said, well, there is externality, but things don't truly exist, but they inherently exist at a conventional level, because they'd have to for things to work. That wouldn't make any sense if things didn't have a nature from their own side, but it requires you too to impute it as such a thing and the basis of designation coming together, which actually intrinsically exists as what you're kind of saying it does from a conventional level. And then the Buddha at the final point stated that nothing exists intrinsically. Second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Madhyamaka Prasangika view. So all of those things become more and more subtle as we look at the staircase to emptiness. And if we look at what the Buddha first said, that if you get rid of the idea that there's an autonomous, substantially existent self of person, that will get you out of samsara, it actually won't. And it's believed that it will all the way up to the Madhyamaka system, the Svatantrika Madhyamaka. So highly realized scholars were still not understanding what the root of samsara was, and were positing something that was the root of samsara that wasn't. And if you meditate your whole life on something that isn't the antidote to samsara, what's the problem? You can't get out of samsara with that antidote. You can have suppression, but you can't get out of samsara without that antidote. So we have to analyze within Buddhism, the Buddha's own words, and then also measure them up against other traditions. And it was a beautiful thing in ancient India. If your tradition was out debated logically by another tradition, you had to convert. So these were the stakes at that time. And now we just believe anything that we hear. We think a lama's high because they have some sort of name, and we don't investigate their behavior. We don't investigate what they really have to say. We don't investigate their view. We just look at them with like starry eyes as if they're a poster on a wall when we're a child. And this is not what the Buddha told us to do. He says, then you should, after you've analyzed all the different teachers, the explanations, and then within Buddhism, all the different views, then you should adopt only that which shows the means of attaining the two aims of trainees: high status within cyclic existence, and definite goodness of liberation and omniscience. So we find in Arya Nagarjuna's Precious Garland this idea of high status and certain goodness, and high status being higher realm rebirths, which we will need to progress on the path, and certain goodness falling into two categories: liberation of an abiding nirvana, and then the certain goodness of complete Buddhahood and non-abiding nirvana, where all the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience are removed. So it says that you should adopt only that which shows the means of attaining the two aims of trainees and provides correct proofs. The scriptures of the two systems you're comparing are what are to be analyzed to find which does or does not bear the truth. Thus, it would not be suitable to cite them as a proof of their own truth. Well, I'm quoting a scripture, so that should end what we're saying. I'm just going to quote a scripture, and we have to believe it blindly because I quoted a scripture. It's saying that's not suitable. Only reasoning distinguishes what is or is not true. Right at the beginning, a lot of times we have this idea that, oh, Vajrayana Tantra, it's so sublime, and we can just kind of feel some sort of energies, and we can have our elements transformed by a lama. But at the beginning of the great treatise on the stages of the Tantric path to enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa says, hey, use reasoning and analysis to establish things. Don't have blind faith. Such a powerful point that's made. And this is in Tantra in Tibet. Again, Jeffrey Hopkins' translation with His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and Lama Tsongkhapa. And then in the beginning of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary on Kamalashila's Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, Stages of Meditation, we find a similar point that's being made about faith. He says there's two kinds of faith. There's blind faith, and there's faith based on reason. And the kind of faith that the Buddha was speaking of when he says, don't just because I said them have faith in me, but have faith in me once you've decided that what I said is true. That kind of faith is faith based on reasoning. That kind of faith is not blind faith. Blind faith just says, I believe it because you said it, or because someone holy said it. Faith based on reasoning is as follows. Okay, so this is at the beginning in the prologue of the Stages of Meditation. I'm so fortunate to be studying Acharya Kamalashila's Stages of Meditation now with Umzala Geshe Aga, Drepung Losaling Umzala Geshe Aga, and I just rejoice in his studies and the effort that he puts in and the amount of time that he gives to Lori and I to be able to understand a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. These days, that's all that matters to me. It's just knowing a little bit more. So my practice tomorrow is maybe a little bit clearer, a little bit better. And this is because I've learned to analyze these things, and I engage in a humongous amount of analytical meditation. Also single-pointed meditation, fixed meditation. I think that both are equally important, but the analytical meditation, the fixed meditation, you can learn pretty quickly and you just kind of do it. Analytical meditation requires an immense amount of study. And then you can discover it for yourself, and it'll become your knowledge, and it won't be something borrowed, and it won't be something that's a correctly assuming consciousness. You'll be able to say, I believe this, and it's incontrovertible in my own mind. So here it says, there's two types of faith. Faith that's not based on any special reason, and that which is backed by reason. And we'll get started with the kind of general stuff we always do in the teaching, but I wanted to start out really reinforcing this idea of study, this idea of analysis. Last week we talked about it. We talked about, why it's so important, and We looked at the beginning of Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and looked at dispelling misconceptions about meditation and about just thinking that fixed meditation is all that you need to do, and showing that analytical meditation is really the key to our success and being able to conceptually understand these deeper topics. So it says, in the case of the second type of faith, faith based on reason, an individual examines the object of his or her belief and investigates its relevance to his or her needs and requirements. So, hey, you're saying I want happiness. Is this a path to the highest amount of happiness? I want to be free from suffering. Is this a path to get me to a place where I have freedom from suffering? Can I have the afflictive obstructions removed? And if that happens, I'll have freedom from suffering by engaging in what it says that the Buddha is saying will make that work. Will that goal I have to be free from suffering be able to be achieved? Will the goal that I have to have the highest amount of happiness be able to be achieved? So we look at what our goals are. Our goals are to be free from suffering and have the highest amount of happiness. And we then look to see if we're creating something that can cause those things to occur, or something that can cause the removal of the things that make it so those things don't occur. So it only makes a lot of sense, but we don't usually make sense. And that's why we circle in cyclic existence and need people to point out to us again and again and again what makes sense. So in the second case, which is faith based on reason, an individual examines the object of his or her belief and investigates its relevance to his or her needs and requirements. Okay, so we talked about what are your needs and requirements. You want to have the highest amount of happiness. You want to have complete freedom from suffering. Okay, so we're going to analyze this path based on that. Will it produce that? After seeing the reasons, it says then faith is generated after seeing the reasons why it's adventitious. So why is there an advantage to me doing this? Well, it's because I want happiness and I want freedom from suffering. And this pathway looks like it will allow me to achieve that state. So this is how, we should be approaching this, not with blind faith. In Buddhism in general, and in the Mahayana path in particular, we examine the contents of the teachings and accept those that are logical and reasonable and reject those that are illogical. As such, there are occasions when teachings that are in the Buddha's own words should not be taken literally, but need interpretation. Scriptural teachings that cannot stand logical analysis should not be taken literally, but require interpretation. On the other hand, scriptural teachings that can stand logical analysis should be taken literally. However, if we search for another scriptural authority to distinguish whose scriptures that are to be understood literally and those that are to be interpreted, will fall into the fallacy of infinite regress. We must examine both types of scriptural teachings with logic. Therefore, we can see that in the study of Buddhist scriptures, logical analysis has a very important place. Before you embark on your investigation, it is essential that you study the techniques for testing the object of your analysis. For people who want to follow the Buddha's teachings and practice, mere faith is not enough. Faith should be backed by reason. When you study, follow a logical method. While I'm teaching, I want you to pay good attention, make notes, or use other means to be able to retain what I teach. We're so fortunate to have beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama in our world who can really show us the way to understanding, show us that we can't just, and we'll get merit, but just making prayers over and over again and not knowing the meaning, not using any reasoning, won't have the kind of power to get at the root of our problems. Just doing mantras are going to allow us to accumulate virtue, but if we don't even know what we're doing or what we're saying or why we're doing it, the tantric path is extremely profound, and it's charged with all of the foundations of the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity of the perfection vehicle. So it says you have to know what the logical order is. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says right here, when you study, follow a logical method. So why are we so lucky tonight? Because we have the stages of the path to enlightenment that Lord Atisha in the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment was so kind to point out for us when he said to understand there are teachings for beings of three capacities, small, medium, and great, and I shall write clearly to distinguish their individual characteristics. And then went on, and then the great commentators in the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Galupa tradition went on to explain what that means exactly in a stage of progressive stages, of coarser to the most subtle levels, stages that serve as foundations for one another for latter realizations. A logical method, something that isn't just based on an idea, that's based on an idea with reasoning behind it, that shows us how one, like myself, could go from a place of completely defiled mind, self-grasping ignorance, the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, seeing everything 24/7 as inherently existent, to a state of mind of complete perfection, a state of mind where one has a perfect realization of and has an excellent quality of the perfect realization of how to care for others. What reality and diversity could simultaneously mean, conventional and ultimate truth, the simultaneous apprehension of the non-dualistic awareness with a simultaneity of dualistically understanding conventional truth. Non-dualistically understanding emptiness while simultaneously dualistically understanding the conventional truth. Wow, whatever that means. And we're fortunate that we have a pathway to be able to go from the place where I'm at, where I see things to appear as inherently existent 24/7, to where I could at all times not see that, and then be able to, because of the removal of the things that makes me see that, I would be able to be the most reliable guide in the universe and have perfect love and compassion, perfect skillful means, power, perfect wisdom, perfect caring for others, perfect everything, perfect generosity, perfect ethics, perfect patience, perfect effort, perfect concentration, perfect wisdom, perfect skillful means, aspiration and power, perfect exalted wisdom. These 10 perfected qualities that the Buddha has in the resultant stage of the 11th ground. I'm going to go from where I'm at to that. That's amazing. And we can use logic and reasoning to prove that I can go from where I'm at to that. Wow. And you can all go from where you're at to that. Why? Because our mind isn't stuck. Our mind is in the nature of clear light and unsullied. These stains that are there are adventitious and just need to be extracted, just need to be removed. We need an opponent to remove those things. We need to distill our mind, distill it to its actual place. We can take very, very dirty water and we can purify it, because those stains, the dirt in water, isn't part of its nature, isn't part of the H2O. It can be distilled down to that. Our mind isn't in the nature of being defiled. It can be distilled, and it can have the most expansive quality possible, because our mind is like it's in a constricted kind of suit, or frozen in an ice block right now. And the wisdom realizing emptiness and the abandonment of the self-cherishing attitude melts that ice block, takes off that suit that's constricting the mind, and allows it to flow with compassion to all sentient beings. So with that being said, I feel like, and I really mean it, like the luckiest person in the face of the earth. I really feel so lucky to have met with teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and Demolocha Rinpoche and Khensa Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche and Umsala Geshe Aga Rinpoche and Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche. I was so fortunate to continue to study with Geshe Yeshe Tapke Rinpoche is teaching the Rice Seedling Sutra so clearly. I really ask all of you to go look. It's on the Shravasti Abbey website. He's been teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching the Rice Seedling Sutra, and he has an incredible book out on the Rice Seedling Sutra. I would encourage you all to encourage you to follow, because he uses that text to teach out of during his teachings. And he's in our world right now, 96 years old, and one of the greatest scholars of an entire generation. He's still teaching so clearly. And I encourage, and with a translator, the great Lotsawa Katrina Brooks, who is so incredible, like a machine of translation that makes sure she gets every single word. And I really rejoice in the efforts that everybody's putting in. We have these incredible teachers in our world. So out of inspiration, let's begin setting this incredible motivation of bodhicitta, saying, hey, I'm here today for one reason. I want to achieve the complete freedom from suffering, the highest amount of happiness that's possible. And I want the most reliability I can have so that I can help everyone. I don't want my loved ones to have to endure states of suffering and kind of states of happiness that change, that aren't the most amount of happiness possible. So I'm attending this teaching today to figure out how to become the kind of being who possesses the kind of qualities that I'm looking for. So I say I'm attending this teaching today to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, and to inspire us more, to give us conviction that it's possible to become a Buddha, to be able to progress, to change our minds, to go from an unenlightened state to an enlightened state. Let's imagine the merit field in the space in front of us. Imagine that we're receiving the blessings of actually having our minds transformed, not because of some external source giving us juice, because this external source that we're trying to connect our minds with over and over again has taught the truth of suchness to us, has taught us to abandon the 10 non-virtues and so forth, and has taught us how to engage in correct behaviors. And we start to actually do it. And this is the blessing of our mind. This is the blessing that occurs. We connect our previous familiarizations and our habituations that are good to what we're trying to do, and it helps it to reinforce it. And it helps us to always connect with these teachers and tell our minds that the information's in the merit field. When we look at the merit field and the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings and all of the different masters of the Tibetan tradition and all the different deities and stuff that we imagine when we think of the merit field, when we're imagining these beings that are there in the space in front of us, we're imagining this so that we will always connect to the truth that they teach, to the points that are being presented there, so that we're never in any of our lives separated from our perfect teachers. Who are our perfect teachers? Our perfect teacher is our root Lama. The merit field is a manifestation of our perfect teacher. These teachings are all manifestations of our guide guiding us. So if we can look at it in this way, we'll feel guided. We'll feel that there are these beings who are showing us that evolution is possible. So imagine all the holy beings in the space in front of you, however you can do it, imagining Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Chen Rezig himself in person. Excuse me, imagine that these beings are all in the space in front of you as if they're really there, looking into your eyes with immense love and kindness. Just the same way, if you've ever looked into the eyes of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you can tell someone is looking at you that loves you, that cares about you, that only wants what's good for you. So imagine all of the enlightened beings that, and however you imagine the space in front of you. And now imagine that you invite all sentient beings to be your guests to hear these teachings, hear the teachings on the stage of the path to enlightenment. Specifically, we're now at the great scope. We're learning about bodhicitta. Hear how it is that one could make their mind move to all sentient beings freely in such a way that one would want them. One would think, oh, I want them to have happiness. I want them to be free from suffering. I'm going to be the one who makes that happen. I must be a Buddha to make that happen. We're learning how to do this. So using all of the techniques that we've learned to try to expand our mind, to be able to move our mind to all sentient beings. Let's now Imagine we invite all sentient beings here to be our guest. Imagine that we invite all of our friends, those who are closest to us, beginning with the closest connection. We've been meditating on all sentient beings or our mother. Imagine that we begin with beings who are connected to us in that very intimate way, and then moving on to different relations and so forth in terms of friendship, and then moving on to neutral beings or strangers, folks that you've seen, you know who they are, but you don't really have a relationship with them, and then moving on to difficult beings, moving on to those beings we find distasteful, moving on to those beings that we have a really hard time wanting to have them be happy. And this just shows the weakness of our own mind. This isn't a strength in our mind. This is a weakness of our mind. When we feel a certain kind of disturbance in our mind in relation to another being, it means that we haven't practiced enough to see another being and say, Mama, to see that other being and say, oh, I'm so sad that you're under the influence of afflictions. I want you to be happy and I want you to be free from suffering, instead of saying, I don't like the way that you're behaving, and leaving it at that, saying, even though I don't like the way you're behaving, I love you and I want you to be free from suffering. And love in this case means I want you to have happiness and the causes of happiness. So it's super against our grain to think in this manner. It's not normal for us to say, oh, someone who is really, in our eyes, an awful person is someone that I want to have happiness and I want to be free from suffering. And this is the lesson over and over and over again, that we have to kind of put our minds to the test of whether or not we're evolving. And when we feel that disturbance, we feel that tightness in relation to others, not on our meditation cushion, when we're watching the news, or when we're, even it comes down to, I guess, music makes people really angry these days. Whatever it is, if we're not able to say, well, that makes somebody happy, or we're not able to see that, everybody deserves to be happy, and deserves to be free from suffering. Everybody's equally important. If we're not able to feel that at all, even in relation to simple things in life, how could we ever just spontaneously just see someone who would normally really tick us off and say, Mama, I owe you, I must repay your kindness by showing you how to achieve a state of freedom from suffering and complete happiness. So bring all those beings here, friends, neutrals, and enemies. And I know I always pause at this point because it's so important, because we're doing this kind of as a team together. We're looking at our minds and we're each week seeing if it's changing at all. And here's the mirror of the Dharma that these great beings always talk about, that we look into to see if it's working, to see if it's changing. So we bring all of these beings, and then we bring the rest of samsara that we don't even know really much about: hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods. Bring them all here to be your guests, to be able to hear the stage of the path to enlightenment teaching. Imagine that you're doing that, because eventually, when you become a Buddha, you'll be able to connect to every single sentient being in the universe and be able to figure out how to best help them if they're vessels for your helping. And this is the thing with the Buddha. The Buddha can't just intervene and just pull you into a room and fix you. We have to keep connecting in this way with the merit field. We have to keep connecting and be like a pool of water that allows the moon to reflect on. If there's nothing for the moon to reflect on, the moon doesn't reflect. Likewise, we have to have the causes and conditions in our mind to be able to meet with these teachings, for these teachings to matter to someone like me. There had to be something that I created previously that created a pool for the teachings to shine on. And the more we do this in this life, we know, based on results being concordant with causes, and know that we in this life have this kind of affinity and aptitude, we must have previously created a cause that created that affinity. And we don't want that affinity to end, because we've decided, because we don't have blind faith, that this is the way to actually achieve our goals. Wow. It never, the profundity of this logic and reasoning never ceases to just blow my mind and amaze me. So now everybody's here. all sentient beings, all the enlightened beings. Imagine they're actually here. Imagine that you've actually able to do this. Make your mind more relaxed and more used, familiar with doing such things. This creates the fertile ground. This creates the mental basis for your mind to actually be able to expand to the point where it can do this. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't something that doesn't make any sense and just believe it like a magic show. This is someone telling you step by step. The Buddha is saying step by step. The Nalanda Pandits saying step by step. The incredible Tibetan master saying step by step. This is what you need to do in order to progress. And as you do these steps, because you're going to use analytical meditation, you'll discover that this step I told you to engage in works. You don't just have to kind of hang in there and then you just die and hope it was right. You will see in this life, your mind start to change, and then you'll be able to, at the end of your life, if you are able to not have a freak accident happen. Any one of us could die at any moment. But if you're at the end of your life on your deathbed, you'll be able to say, I'm not scared. I don't have regrets. And I know that I'm going to connect with these teachings because I've created the causes and conditions to do so. And I know at the time of death, my mind's going to be in a way that my becoming, my potential existence is going to be one that will make me meet with the Dharma. These are the stakes. So now we imagine that. So we were talking about the definitive teachings and the figurative teachings. So now we're going to read the Heart Sutra. First turning of the wheel of Dharma has to be interpreted. Third turning of the wheel of Dharma has to be interpreted. Second turning of the wheel of Dharma, according to the Madhyamaka Prasangika view, is the definitive teaching. The Buddha meant what he said. The Buddha meant that nothing, not the Buddha's mind, not the Buddha, not a giraffe, not a guitar, not music, not sound, nothing, not Buddha nature, nothing exists intrinsically. Nothing intrinsically exists, independently exists, inherently exists by way of its own character. Nothing. And when you submit every phenomena in the universe, including ultimate truth, to ultimate analysis, you will find that nothing inherently exists. Ultimate truth does not inherently exist. Ultimate truth does not exist ultimately. It exists conventionally. There is no phenomena in the universe that exists intrinsically, inherently, independently, established by way of its own character, established right within the object, even conventionally. There is nothing. But things exist. They just don't exist the way that you think that they do. And the Heart Sutra comes to explain that things exist, but they don't have a mode of existence. They don't exist the way that you think that they do. That's simple. And the way that you think that they do exist, intrinsically, independently, inherently, established by way of its own character, the way that you think they exist and the way that they appear to you to exist is wrong. And based on that wrong basis, that concrete appearance of this or that, we have inappropriate attention that says this or that is attractive or unattractive. And we become attached to that which we find attractive, and we have aversion to that which we find unattractive. And we have offshoots of all of these other things. All because we saw the opposite of what the Buddha came to tell us at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha said things don't inherently exist. We think things inherently exist. The second turning of the wheel of Dharma is the knowledge that's necessary to cut the root of cyclic existence. The root of cyclic existence, according to Buddha, is grasping at things as having a mode of existence that they don't. The root of cyclic existence is an innate self-grasping view, grasping at the self of person and phenomena as having intrinsic existence, as having some kind of intrinsic production, some kind of intrinsic object. And we're so fortunate that the masters have come after Buddha Shakyamuni to explain what the Buddha meant by this and how conventional truth, how conventional existence, how karma and its results, how the Four Noble Truths, how cause and effect, how everything functions whilst being empty of intrinsic existence, and how Arya Nagarjuna says that nothing could function if it isn't empty of intrinsic existence. He uses the lower school's reasonings against them. He says that you say nothing could function if it doesn't intrinsically exist, nothing would make sense. And Arya Nagarjuna comes to say that nothing could function if it has intrinsic existence, and nothing could make sense. And that's the definitive truth, that nothing can function if it has intrinsic existence. And then if it has intrinsic existence, cause and effect can't make sense. You thinking that your boot is a shoe and my dog thinking that it's a toy, if it has intrinsic existence, that can't possibly make sense. So we'll leave it at that. The Buddha came to say we're really screwed up in the way that things appear to us, and the way that we think that their mode of existence is, the way we apprehend them. And the way that we apprehend them, the way that we grasp at those things as having intrinsic inherent existence, is the root of our cyclic existence. And them appearing to us is caused by the imprints of that self-grasping ignorance that only the Buddha has removed. Okay. So, and then hidden within this, we find the 5 paths: path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Those 5 bodhisattva paths that one has to go through in order to become a Buddha and have more and more refined realizations of emptiness, in terms of what those refined realizations abandon in our minds. We have all of these levels of afflictive obstructions and these levels of obstructions to omniscience that have to be removed and are removed in stages in a certain way. And it's so cool that we've got the book to say how they're removed, and not like, oh, we should just have blind faith in this. It all makes sense if you start to study and start to use reasoning. And Rinpoche, Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche told us, never be satisfied with partial instructions. Okay, so the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One, at the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita addressed in this way? Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity, no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, mind, consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala ne jo damba ne nguje de nga yi de baba lama yi zi ni so la sha ze lo agasamara jasandra samara be agasamara. Agasamara jasandra samara ya ve de adonga de gade baraka de barasanga de badizo ababa gonja sanje ga e de me doji she robodoji me bodoji shiwa doji dragi baji me de vision danji she den gori so ha gerin jaji she wa da me dun be jan dan ro dan tam ba jon jin bon zon don joji da ji de jan den da de le sho. Okay. Outer mandala offering is a request for teaching. I know we're like 3/4 of the way through the teaching, but the introduction is, it's just important that I get this information to you as I, find it helpful. So the order to me isn't as important as getting the information to you that can help you transform your mind as it can help you transform mine. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies, massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Lama Damba Jenanji, Jiji Gala Jense Junzinji, Jita Zambe Dujin Limala, Saje Chuji Jaba Baduzo. And we'll insert the source of all my good in the mandala offering. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that, but this is by Lama Tsongkhapa, by the way, for anybody who's new. And I apologize to anybody who's watching me crooked. I can't seem to get the thing to not be crooked. For those of you on the app that are looking at me crooked. The source of all my good, foundation of all good qualities by Lama Tsongkhapa. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him or her in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow them with all my strength and reverence. Bless me to perceive and realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then to ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs, the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I am not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Once that I've practiced well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to always keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Nirata Yami. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice, by the merit I accumulated by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I accumulate by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So wonderful. Great to be with you tonight. So we've been looking at this stanza from the foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, that says, I've slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother has fallen into. Grant me then to take on myself the wish that it says, grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Sorry, we've been reading different versions of the refuge prayer and different versions of the source of all my good, foundation of all good qualities. So I'm mixing them up, and they're all great, and they all offer different kind of lights into what the real meaning, what Lama Tsongkhapa was trying to say. So before we get started with looking at that third step, so we've been looking, just bringing everybody where we're at. We've been looking at bodhicitta. So we've been looking at aspiring bodhicitta. So we've been looking on at this idea of wanting to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings and how that could actually become a main mind of ours, this wish, this bodhicitta, how this could become our mind. How would this be created? What are the steps to making it happen? And when we look at what those steps to making the mind that aspires to enlightenment occur, we look at the steps, we find that there's 2 causal lineages for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. One passed down from the extensive deeds lineage from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya and Master Asanga, and down through the lineages through Master Serlimpa and Lord Atisha, and then through Tibetan lineages to us. And then there's also the practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Arya Manjushri to Arya Nagarjuna, passed down through Bodhisattva Shantideva, through the Profound View lineage, down again through Lama Salimpa, Master Salimpa, and then Lord Atisha, and then down through the Tibetan masters, and then to us. So we've been specifically looking at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we went through the kind of step of equanimity, which is the pre-step to it that's not included in the 6 causes and 1 result, making for 7. It's a pre-step. So we looked at equanimity, having equanimity in relation to friends, enemies, and neutrals, and being equally willing to benefit all of them, having an open mind to every single one of them by looking at the uncertainty of karma that we looked in the medium scope section at, and understanding the varying relationships we've had with these beings and so forth. So we've looked at the establishment of beginningless lives and the establishment of a relationship in beginningless lives with these various beings, established that we should have an open mind in relation to all of them. And then we looked at recognizing sentient beings as our mother. And then we looked at remembering the kindness of each and every single sentient being in the universe in relation to the fact that they are our mothers. And then we looked at, now we're in the part where we're wishing to repay that kindness. So I want to go right back to the beginning of this section in the second volume of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, where we get into bodhicitta and the six perfections. And it begins with, I think, something really awesome. So I wanted to read it. It says, respectfully, I bow at the feet of those excellent and revered persons who have great compassion. So it says, after such extended meditation on the faults of cyclic existence from various perspectives. So we looked at, when we go backwards, we're right now in the great scope. Oh, I got to do my thing here. Hold on. So now we're looking at the great scope, but we know that the great scope has to be supported by the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity and the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. And those teachings have taught us about the disgusting nature of cyclic existence. If we've been listening, if we've actually studied them, we have a basis from which to say, yuck, and you have yuck too. We've looked at the 8 sufferings, we've looked at the 6 sufferings, we've looked at the 3 sufferings, and we've found nothing in cyclic existence that's desirable. Nothing for me and nothing for you that's desirable. So we've come to this conclusion that we are in a prison, and the only way to not be in a prison, there's 6 realms of prison, is to get out of those 6 realms, to be unbound from that which causes us to be in those 6 realms, to be unbound from samsara, because we are bound to samsara now. So it's saying, after extended meditation on the faults of cyclic existence from various perspectives. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, please don't be satisfied with partial instructions. Please don't do little meditations. Please don't think that you know everything. Please don't be so arrogant. Please don't think this stuff is simple. Please don't think that your mind can evolve so quickly. Please, please, please do extended meditation on the faults of cyclic existence from various perspectives, and you will see all of cyclic existence as a pit of blazing fire. You will see the person driving by in a Lamborghini who has $1 billion, who feels so, music cranking and feeling the best they've ever felt. Someone that you would normally envy as being in a pit of blazing fire. Not seeing it in a different way, seeing him in a pit of blazing fire. Then you will be completely consumed with the desire to attain liberation, the elimination of suffering and the afflictions. If you truly understand the suffering the suffering of change, the pervasive conditioned suffering, if you truly understand that kind of happy feeling you have, you're in cyclic existence. That's a contaminated happy feeling. It's necessarily the suffering of change. It's bait that keeps you in samsara, that makes you think that it's something good that isn't. Once you learn all about what is really real, what is really going on, the things that you think are good aren't good. Once you understand that all of cyclic existence, no matter which of the 6 realms of cyclic existence you are in, are disgusting, are a burning, blazing pit, are somewhere to get out of. There is nothing good about them. The only thing good about them is they're a basis from which you can get out of them. So once you've figured that out, if you learn the path of the 3 precious trainings, you'll attain liberation. So if you have the highest higher training in ethics, concentration, and wisdom, then you can attain liberation. You can attain an abiding nirvana, freedom from samsara. You can get rid of the self-grasping ignorance which binds you to cyclic existence, which is free of cyclic existence and is indeed irreversible. So it's a true cessation. It's a cessation that's for good. That samsara won't come back. The thing which gives rise to samsara has been completely removed, and nothing will make it come back, because the afflictions, and the subtlest affliction, the self-grasping ignorance, is what gives rise to inappropriate attention, that gives rise to the coarse afflictions, that give rise to contaminated karmas, that give rise to cyclic existence. And if you don't have that which is actually making the whole process start, just like in the Rice Seedling Sutra, Lord Buddha says, you don't have any way for the process to occur at all. So this is what the arhats and the Buddha have done. They've made it so the process of samsara can never occur again. So here it says, if you learn the three paths of the highest higher trainings, you can be free from cyclic existence. It's irreversible, unlike the glory of high status from cyclic existence. So you may be able to work on getting a higher realm rebirth, but what about 10 rebirths from now? What about 20 rebirths from now? It's reversible. We won't have certainty until we've gotten rid of that which gives rise to cyclic existence, because cyclic existence is a blazing pit, a fire, a jail, is disgusting, is not something that we should find attractive, but we do. However, your elimination of faults and attainment of good qualities will be incomplete. Oh, wait a second. You just told me that I can be out of cyclic existence. Why am I not complete? Why is being in an abiding nirvana not complete? Why is the state of foe destroyer of a hero, solitary realizer, not complete? This is what it's talking about. Someone who's in an abiding nirvana. Why isn't that complete? It's not complete because you will not have accomplished your own aims and can only accomplish the purpose for others in a limited way. Eventually, a Buddha will exhort you and you will have to enter the Mahayana. Because of this, intelligent persons enter the Mahayana from the beginning. So here, this is kind of a little pep talk about, why you would want to engage in these practices. And how do you enter the Mahayana? The entrance to the Mahayana is bodhicitta. How do you get bodhicitta? Well, we're talking about that. We're talking about the exact process that will be necessary in order to get bodhicitta. We're not being vague. We're looking at it the way the Buddha encourages to. The Buddha's wish for us was to discover these teachings. The Buddha does not remove the Buddha does not wash away our miseries, remove them with his hands, or give us his or her realizations. The Buddha teaches us. That's all that we can have, is this teaching that then we can transform our minds with, and that we can then cultivate these realizations and discover these realizations that the Buddha showed us how to discover. Again, we started the teachings with the Buddha saying, the bhikshus, just as a goldsmith cuts and rubs and burns gold to make sure that it's real, likewise, check my teachings. Don't just believe in them because I'm Buddha. Don't follow them until you've checked them to see if what I'm saying makes sense. And then once you've done that, then you can say that you're my student. So we're checking these teachings. We're doing what the Buddha wished for us to do. We're looking at, does this really make sense? And how would I believe that all beings are my mother? How could I, and if they are all my mother, what does that matter? Well, we need to remember they were so kind. Well, if someone's been kind to me, I'd like to repay them. So we have to make this so irreversible in our mind that, according to the Pabunka Rinpoche, that we'll eventually become upon a worm and say, mama. We'll come upon a worm and not even, question whether or not they took care of us when we were vulnerable, and say, I take on myself the task of freeing that being, and I'm becoming a Buddha in order to make sure that that happens. We will naturally, spontaneously, eventually think in those terms, and we don't think in those terms now. We have a self-cherishing attitude that thinks that we're more important than anyone else in the world. We not only, just kind of like are oblivious, we disregard, we blatantly will push people out of the way to get what we want, because we have not been operating in a way that tallies with reality. We operate in a way that we think that we will be happy if we cherish ourselves more than others. And what we don't realize is that this self-cherishing attitude has been like someone who's been coming up empty-handed to us the whole time and saying, I have something for you to offer. I have something wonderful for you. And they've been creating this illusion. They're just like this ghost with an empty hand that says they have something for us to give to us. And they're just deceiving us over and over and over again, because the only thing that we get from our self-cherishing attitude is a limited mind. And a limited mind can't experience the highest amount of happiness. So how do we unlimit our mind? We do so by looking at all in this case, and then there's also the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice we'll get into who knows when later. And we're going to look at it in the same investigatory way through lots of lenses of lots of Lojong texts. But in this case, we're looking at the 7-point cause and effect, and we're on the third third point. So last week we talked about Acharya Chandragroman. We told the story about, him, meeting outside the gates of Nalanda with Acharya Chandrakirti, and then being escorted in by way of, them both bringing a statue into Nalanda, and then for many, many years engaging in debates about the mind-only school versus Madhyamaka view, many, many years. So we read, let's just read it. So the first quote's from Chandragroman. So we said that Chandragroman was around the time of Acharya Chandrakirti, around the 7th century. Sometimes they say it's also earlier. Historians, who knows? I'm not a historian. I just know that we have the, kind of in the Namtar, we have the story of him debating with Chandrakirti. We know the approximate time when Chandrakirti was around, which is also debated. So again, don't use history to prove your Buddhism. Use philosophy to prove it. Don't get stuck on, oh, this date, that's that date. That's not the right date. This has been before. This wasn't the, get stuck on whether or not it's logical, whether it makes sense, whether if you subject it to ultimate analysis, if it's going to come up as, if you subject it to critical analysis, if it's going to come up with something that makes sense or not. Use that as your guideline. These beings. Okay, so we're reading from Lama Tsongkhapa's Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. Step number 3, supported by the precept, of course. What's the precept? Equanimity, you said. So the precept of equanimity, and then the steps leading up to this, wishing to repay the kindness. Step number 3, which are all sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness, and now we're wishing to repay their kindness. And anybody who hasn't been watching the teachings, they're on YouTube, they're on the Buddhist Center, Buddha's Center, one word, Buddhas Center. That's the name of the YouTube page, and all of these get kind of stored there so that you can watch them later. And I encourage you, if you really want to look at this 7-point cause and effect in a thorough way, not because I taught it, because I used tons of resources and read from them, I'd encourage you to listen to it, because it will help you shape your mind. And it's helped me to understand these teachings a lot more by looking at all these different commentaries. It's like little tricks that give me shortcuts to figuring this out. Because those beings have been so kind to come before us and then share these teachings with us. These beings, your kind mothers, whom you do not recognize due to the process of death and rebirth. So we talked about last week. I don't even remember things that happened 10 years ago. How could it not be logical that I might have forgotten something that happened last lifetime? My memory is so short, even in this lifetime. I don't remember so many things. I don't remember really anything about like being in a crib or being that small. So I wasn't that small ever. I was never in a crib because I don't remember it. We have to start to use logic and reasoning and say, okay, well, what would be a way to prove it? Well, we look at this moment's consciousness from a previous moment's consciousness from a previous moment's consciousness, and then we find a beginningless point. We made these points already. So we've merely forgotten because we've died and then been reborn. And a lot of stuff happened in the Bardo. It was a lot of stuff. A lot of things went on. It was crazy. We died. Things went crazy. And then we were in a womb. Do you remember that? Do you remember being in a womb? Why not? Didn't happen because you weren't in a womb? It didn't happen because you don't remember it? And the moment before you were in a womb, where'd your consciousness come from? Something perfect? Why aren't you perfect? It has to be from something that's concordant. Results are concordant with causes. Did it come from something that's not it, just out of nowhere, like magic? Couldn't have. So we just forgot. And these kind mothers are suffering and have no refuge. We have a refuge. We know about these teachings. We know, if we've studied up to this point, what the 3 highest higher trainings and what the problem is that's keeping its encyclic existence. We have a refuge. We have the 3 jewels. We have fear of cyclic existence, fear of the self-grasping ignorance, and faith that the Buddha, based on our reasoning faith, that the Buddha is an appropriate refuge that can protect us from self-grasping ignorance that causes all of our problems. There is nothing more shameful than to do your best to liberate yourself from cyclic existence while considering these beings your mother unimportant and abandoning them. So now we're reinforcing this idea. Don't turn back now. Do not just move towards personal liberation. think about those people that you love and think about the state of suffering and the protectorlessness, the state that they have of no protection, and think, would it be nice if I just then quietly went off and took care of all of my needs while everybody else was just in a state of a disgusting, blazing fire? So Chandra Groman, who we talked about last week, we gave a little story on, letter to his student states, while you see that your relatives are engulfed in the ocean of cyclic existence and are as if fallen into a fire pit, there is nothing more shameful than to work for your own liberation, neglecting those whom you do not recognize due to the process of death and rebirth. Therefore, reflect. If abandoning such beings is unsuitable even for disreputable persons, how could it be appropriate in my case? And then assume the responsibility to repay the kindness. The same text states, the infant on the mother's lap cannot do anything, suckles milk which flows through love. While through the same love that mother endures many hardships, who even among the most disreputable would like abandoning his or her mother who is suffering? Who even among the most disreputable wants to leave and abandon those who provided a home, who carefully looked after the child with compassion, and who are afflicted without refuge and suffering? So we're thinking about what suffering is. And all of these beings who don't have a refuge, don't have a Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to go to, don't have any idea even how to transform. And I can't really help them yet because I'm laying in the same pit and trying to do my best. So I must become a Buddha for their sake. And then we find a quote from Sri Ratnadasa's praise of infinite qualities. And I believe that Sri Ratnadasa was a student of Dignaga and of Vasubandhu, but check into that and see if I'm right or wrong. He's not a hugely, Acharya Sri Ratnadasa isn't hugely quoted a lot. And if maybe I'm wrong, but I believe this is who he is. It is not my way to liberate myself while abandoning these beings whose blind ignorance ruins their intelligence and who are my fathers and children, serving and lovingly helping me. Thinking this, I made aspirational prayers to liberate these protectorless beings. So then there's a qualm. And Lama Tsongkhapa puts up this qualm. How can you repay their help? No matter how much wealth and happiness your mothers obtain in cyclic existence, it all deceives them. So can you give them a cookie? Does that repay their kindness? Can you give them $50,000 if you had it? Would that do it? It says no. It says no. No matter how much wealth and happiness your mother obtains in cyclic existence, it all deceives them. Thus, you must repay their help, thinking, formerly my mothers were seriously wounded because the madness of the afflictions possessed them. Then I produced a variety of sufferings for those beings who were already suffering, as if I had applied sea salt to their deep wounds. And we talked about what this means last week. Now I will establish these beings who lovingly help me in the happiness of liberation, nirvana. And then from Acharya Bhavavega's Heart of the Middle Way. So as we get to these different pandits, I think it's good that we talk a little bit about who they are. So Acharya Bhavavega is someone that you find when you're thinking of the lineages in the Profound View lineage. He's considered the opener of the Chariot Way for the Svatantrika Madhyamaka view, not the Prasangika Madhyamaka view, the opener of the Chariot Way for the Middle Way Autonomy School. And yeah, I want to give you more of this story, and I see that the time's ticking, but basically when Acharya Bhavavega was present, prior to that, Acharya Buddhapalita, they didn't actually meet, had written a text on the middle, and the wisdom text on the middle, and he made a syllogism that said things are not arisen from self because production, we'll say the long syllogism again, would be pointless or would be meaningless and endless. So this was according to the middle way consequence view, the Madhyamaka Prasangika view. So Buddha Palita made this syllogism, and then Baba Vega came along. This is all 5th and 6th century time, just generally speaking. And Acharya Baba Vega came along and did not like this point that was made and felt that it had problems, that the syllogism wasn't good, and that it wasn't able to negate the Samkhya view, which is the point of negating the arisal from self in this case, or one of the points for negating the self-arisal, self-production. And also that Acharya Bodhipalita was going against Arya Nagarjuna's view. It wasn't, he was, contradicting the middle way view. So you can look more into this. If you get the book Meditation on Emptiness by, again, Jeffrey Hopkins, you'll find this whole thing. And I know, John, you're on right now. Priscilla, you're on. You have these books. You can see the big debate between Acharya Buddhapalita and Baba Vega. Buddhapalita is not even debating anyone. He just said something, and Baba Vega says, hey, I don't agree with your syllogism. And then opens the way for what we call the autonomy school. And then Chandrakirti comes along later and says, hey, Baba Vega, you got it wrong. Buddhapalita was just fine. You even shortened his syllogism and took the again out and said that things are not produced from self because production would be meaningless and endless. And Acharya Buddhapalita said again in there. So you're reasoning, you're fighting against something that's not even the whole syllogism. So there's a big debate that takes place, this whole thing that goes on. And I encourage you to all find out more about it in Meditation on Emptiness. And we'll talk a little bit more about maybe what the problems were to a certain degree or not next week. So from Baba Vega's Heart of the Middle Way, again, Acharya Baba Vega. So I'm trying to change my habit, because Geshe Dorje Damdula pointed out, when you read it in the Tibetan, it says Lopun Lichtenje, but then, which means like Acharya Baba Vega, would mean like the great teacher, the master Baba Vega, Acharya in Sanskrit, or Lopun in Tibetan. But then when it comes into the English in all of our books, they never put the honorific before it, even though in the Tibetan it says it. So I'm trying to get in the habit of adding the great master Baba Vega or Acharya Baba Vega. Certain beings we say Acharya, certain beings we say Arya Nagarjuna, Arya Manjushri, Arya Vimuktasena, for instance, Arya Sangha. So we have, and then we say Acharya Basubandhu, Acharya Haryabhadra. So we use these honorifics, and with Bodhisattva Shantideva, or sometimes it's just important in the Tibetan tradition these aren't our buddies. These are holy beings where when we say their names, our mouths should have a reverence around their name that is really worthy. So we connect our minds and say, this is a special person. This isn't my neighbor. This isn't, someone I'm just calling. Like, oh, hey, Bill, come on over here. I'm saying, Acharya Basubandhu, please come. I supplicate you to be able to help me understand these teachings. So anyway, I'm trying to get out of the habit of that. And when you hear me, stumbling or saying, it's because I'm so used to, for almost 30 years now, not putting the honorific in front, that it's a relearning for me. And it's an exercise in mindfulness that I'm trying to do. And I even saw myself while I was just teaching, forgetting it sometimes and remembering it sometimes. But we evolve by trying to have heedfulness, paying attention to what we're doing, have mindfulness, knowing what we've told ourselves not to forget, and then a vigilance or a kind of spy in our mind, making sure we're doing what we said we were supposed to be doing, and not haven't moved away from what we've said we were supposed to be doing. And if we have, then mindfulness will bring it all back. But if we haven't had some sort of general heedfulness going on or conscientiousness, mindfulness and introspection, or the spy in the mind, this introspector. This will never occur if we're just like wiling out, as they say. Anyway, that's enough out of me. I hope that this is helpful for you. It's certainly been helpful for me to be able to share these teachings with you. The concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. And I think it's really important that we talk about the merit field, and we talk about the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings. And we say all these different names and that we should want to connect to these beings. And I think it's important. And I'm going to try to, as we go through, kind of point out who these beings are, where they fit into history, what their view kind of was, what they really offered the most, to kind of show us points on and where their emphasis was. So I think that's helpful because it gives you more keys to be able to open doors on your own, because that's what this is all about. That's what Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche has given to me. He said the books, Joa Nsapa's student was on head on the lap as he was dying and said, "What do I do now, master? Who is my teacher?" And then Joa Nsapa said, "The books." And luckily, it's not just the books. I have, incredible teachers I study with. But I also know, because of Rinpoche handed me like a set of keys like 25 janitors would have to know where to open those doors and find more and more things that will help me to evolve my mind. And I'll share those with you as those doors open and I find those things. I'm just so happy that Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche spent so much time with me and cared so much to have the patience with me to then at the end of his life say, I have the confidence. I had patience and now I have some confidence that I'd like you to continue these teachings. And thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you so much. Any mistakes that I made, I apologize. I don't know of any that I've made, but if I made them, may they be purified by Vajrasattva mantra, and may your mind be purified of what you shouldn't analyze. Om benza zara zamaya manabala benza zara zena wajida de me was the guy me was the guy me was rag me was I was me raja zava comes to make him drink roma bakamanza da kada me my munga benza ma zamaya zava om ve. So the wisdom arisen from hearing the correct information is so important. And this is why when teachers say, if I've made any mistakes, may they be purified, because I'm giving you information that you're going to then take to your cushion and analyze, hopefully. And if it's not the right information, it's going to kind of like grind like gears that aren't oiled properly, because it's not going to work. It's not going to make sense. And then you might lose faith altogether, because I didn't give you the thing that's going to make it like there's a very well-oiled machine. So this is the kind of burden that's on the teacher. And this is why we really, as teachers, try to make no mistakes in what we're presenting and not try to teach over our head. But also, if there was a mistake, recognize the severity of such a thing. May we be protected by Paul and Lamo. Jorama, Jorama, Jojorama, Tunjo Kalaracha, Moromo, Achadacha, Tunjo, Rulu, Hongjo, Hong. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors of the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lord Chenrezig, in our world, the wish-fulfilling jewel in the pure land surrounded by snowy mountains. You are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara's end. And then a prayer of supplication written by me to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. Homage to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you. who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atisha came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped, all composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. And anyone who has this long life prayer, let's change the just like Atisha who came to Tibet to just like Lord Atisha who came to Tibet. We'll have to change that on the website too. So trying to be mindful and remember what I should be doing. There it is. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for your patient listening. I hope you apply these teachings. This is not for the sake of piling information up in your mind so you sound smarter. It's so that your mind works smarter and so that you can have smarter results than the one that we've been getting since beginningless time because of ignorance. Thank you.